So, this is my fourth time in the past month that I have attempted to record this video. And I really hope it turns out correct and there are no problems. Because I'm the type of person who you might say has really high standards. And when I don't meet my own expectations, I feel like a failure. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Pensive Fox and these are my thoughts on how to build a compelling NPC. Now, if you're new to my channel, then just know that I'm a poet, a writer, a creator, but mostly in my free time, I am a DM and I DM my own tabletop game of Dungeons and Dragons. I have been playing for a little over 4 years, almost 5 now, and I have been a DM for about 3. And in that time, I've learned a lot. I've learned some things that I need to improve on. I know the things that trip me up. But the best part about being a DM is the fact that you get to do a lot of improvisational stuff. And unlike the players who are only playing one character the entire game, as a DM, you are inherently going to be playing multiple characters. Good characters, bad characters, neutral characters, people who are central to the plot, and people who don't really matter at all in the world. And that's important. That's one of the biggest parts of a role-playing game, is being able to roleplay. And I have seen so many times on streams and in personal games, like even myself, I am guilty of this, when the DM does not create an NPC that is compelling, that makes you believe they are a real person in this fantasy world you've created. Because what's the main reason people play tabletop games? I know that for my table, it's to escape. It's to enjoy a fun new world, to have fun, to forget about the troubles and things you have to deal with every day. And that is what I'm going to be talking about today. This isn't just exclusive for DMs either. You can use this to build your character if you want, if you're really bad at role playing and you need some help. I've met players who they come to me and they're like, Emily, I have no idea how to play this character. And there have been times myself where I build a character and then in game I just have no idea how to make them this believable person that I want them to be, because I'm not that person. And it's tough, but once you learn a good system for creating compelling characters and compelling NPCs, it's going to get a lot easier. And I have found my own solution over the years that I would like to share with all of you. So I say compelling NPC, and I specifically describe NPCs in that way because this word is just perfect. It has 3 aspects that I think make a really good NPC, and the exact Google definition of compelling is to evoke interest, attention, or admiration in a powerfully irresistible way. So I'm going to break it down. I'm going to go first with interest, because to make someone believable, you have to first make them interesting. This can be done a multitude of ways. Generally, people will use appearance or names to evoke interest. That can also be done through race. So the Drow are notoriously known for being, this matriarchal society, very cruel, heartless assassins and just thieves and thugs that live in the Underdark. And if that's how you do it in your world, then that's great. I mean, that's how I do it in my world. They are a very matriarchal society. That being said, not every single Drow is the same. And the Drow are significant to some of my players. So if I want to evoke interest, Drow typically aren't on the surface world. And specifically where my players are now, there is not any population of Drow. So when I say you see someone with a dark bluish tint to their skin, midnight black hair, yellow eyes, like when I start describing a Drow to them, walking through the streets, that immediately grabs their interest. It immediately focuses them on like, wait, what? There's a Drow over there? Okay. That's one way to evoke interest. Another way to make someone interesting is to think about how they speak and their mannerisms. I don't see a lot of DMs do this, but I actually really enjoy doing this, and I find that it helps the players to get into character better, but to actually take on this person's form. And what I mean by that is to literally, move yourself in such a way that you are portraying with the best of your own physical body this NPC. Usually I only see DMs do this when there's a big boss battle and they stand up and they, widen their shoulders and they're like, "Oh, I'm big bad evil guy." And that's cool. You can still do that then, but I really want to encourage people to start doing that more in just everyday situations. So the best example I can think for this that I've applied in my own game recently is Kipper. Kipper is a very, very old gnomish man. He is shorter than the average gnome. On top of that, he's old. He's got a bad back, so he's hunched over. So this guy in total is maybe 3 feet tall. He's really short, really small. He's not having a great time in the world right now because he's really old. He's in a lot of pain all the time. He takes naps and stuff. So he's probably got a grovelly, grumpy voice. Think of that very old man who's been through a lot in his life, is in a lot of pain, but also is very intelligent and is still able to care for themselves. This NPC is essentially a records keeper for this town that they are building. He's been taking all the notes on what's been going on, what creatures they've encountered, and of all the people in the town. He keeps all of the records because there's no library right now. They haven't built it. So he has a lot of responsibility riding on his shoulders. Because of that, he also holds a lot of authority. So when he says to someone, "Tell me exactly what happened," he means tell me exactly what happened. And the way I evoke him is I first get really low in my chair. I get much shorter than I actually am. And you can't see it right now because you're real close to me. And I hunch my shoulders forward and I pull my face down like Kipper would have his face. His chin is almost level with his clavicle. And he talks in this high-pitched but gravelly sort of voice. And he says, "Brilliant! I need you to give me all your notes on what you found in that cave. We need to be prepared for something like that is later on." And because I have taken on that form, I've actually squished my vocal cords so that it's easier to use the voice that I created for him. So that's another way you can evoke interest, not just by how you describe someone or something or what their actual role is, but by you yourself as the DM role-playing, getting into that form. Because when someone sees the DM physically shift themselves to be or do something, to put themselves in a position that they know their DM would normally be in, if you're the DM who's normally leaned back, like, okay, yeah, like if you suddenly sit forward and hunch down, people are going to be like, "What's he doing? What's she doing?" And that's the responses I've gotten. Another way to evoke interest and to describe characters, and this goes for, not just NPCs, just describing anything. Because I found I was guilty of this, and I still am. Sometimes, when you're rushing through descriptions because you just want to get to that battle or you want to get to that interaction. But it's really important to slow down and make sure you describe things as accurately as you can for your players so they fully understand who they're dealing with and what they're dealing with. Give them context clues. One of the most infuriating things as a player is when I was in a group, and I'm not going to name names, but the DM would describe something, but then he wouldn't describe something on the other side of the room that would totally be visible. And to me, that's a disservice to your players. It's almost like tricking them. You should never be trying to trick them unless that's what the NPC is doing. When it comes to context clues and things that they can see, no problem, unless there's a reason they can't see it, like fog, darkness, maybe they've gone blind, or this thing is invisible. Try and describe everything that is relevant to what you are trying to get them to grasp onto. So instead of me rambling, why don't I just give you guys an example? If I were to describe Lady Governess Onyx, I would describe her as a regal, graceful dwarven woman with alabaster skin as smooth as marble, with eyes as dark and piercing as the night sky, with hair finely brushed back into curls piled onto her head, and this flowing, well-tailored gown encrusted with jewels and the like. But if I were to describe Erin, just an NPC that follows one of the party members, Erin is a dark-skinned human. She is very, very tan. She has marred scars across her face that look like, had they been any closer to her eyes, they could have blinded her. She has dreaded black hair that goes down to about her waist that she keeps pulled back. She's wearing simple clothing, but with a dagger at her hip. You immediately get two different vibes from these women who are both in the same town. One, had you not known her name, clearly rich, clearly has power. The other clearly blends in and has some story to the scarring. Onyx, if you remember, I described her with no scars. So that can tell you one of two things. One, she's never been in battle. Or two, she's that good. Erin, having scars, can tell you a few things. But again, one, that she's been in battle and she lost, or she got severely injured before she won. Or two, that she wasn't in battle and something horribly wrong happened, or someone hurt her. And those, of course, aren't the only conclusions you can come to, but those descriptions give context clues for who a person is. You can tell a lot about a person by what they're wearing, if they have tattoos or not. The players just recently learned of an assassin's guild of drow that are now present in their area that are called the White Spiders, and they have tattoos of white spiders on them. That's how you identify that they're part of that group. So now every time they see a drow or encounter a drow, they ask, do we see any tattoos of white spiders? Because as soon as they know who they're dealing with, they can decide how they want to deal with it. Moving on from evoking interest. So you've described this person, you've gotten some interest. Now let's talk about attention. Initially, you might think that interest and attention are the same thing. I did, but I spent a few days thinking about it, and I decided that they're not. They're really, really not. Whereas grabbing someone's interest is more of like a curiosity that gets satisfied, more of like a, oh, what's that? Oh, okay. And then you look away and you move on about your day. That's interest. Attention is when you are like, oh, what's that? Uh-huh. Okay. All right. You see what happened? My reaction with interest was very short, kind of brushed it off like, oh, that's interesting, but not going to deal with it right now. It's not important enough for me to deal with right now. Whereas attention is, wait a second. And you kind of focus in, you start observing this person or this thing. That is how you know you've grabbed the player's attention. As soon as they start asking more questions and trying to get some clarification, trying to put puzzle pieces together, when they're making their perception checks, their investigation rolls on this situation, that's when you know you've got their attention. You want them to be trying to solve this person, to figure them out. So moving on to our example, the best NPC I can think of that I've created recently for that example is Theala. Theala is a barkeep and the owner of a bar in this new town they're in. She initially kind of was just interesting to them. She seemed to know a lot of things. She's married to a guy named Velimir. She seems to be pretty well off. The bar is successful because it's the only bar right now. So that's where everyone goes to get their drinks. Well, a few sessions ago, the paladin was searching for some fiends or demons and went into the bar and procced her sensing ability. And she discovered that there were no fiends in the bar, but that Theala and Velimir were both undead. And that immediately grabbed her attention. This interesting NPC that was very charismatic now was the target and center of this little investigation they started doing as to what type of undead are they and why are they here? Do they have anything to do with the fiends or the demons? Which they found out that they didn't. Theala and Velimir are just vampires. And that, of course, procced more questions. But as these questions got answered, as the situation played out, they learned that Theala and Velimir are not a threat to them currently. And that is how I grabbed their attention with that situation. It's an NPC that's not central to the plot. They're not important at all to any of the characters' backstories, but I created this NPC because I was like, this is interesting, this is fun, and they may never figure out that this person is a vampire, but if they do, that's pretty cool. And that's something that will just be this side thing that they know about now. You can also grab someone's attention with names and appearances as well. Like I said, I have grabbed the player's attention with every single drow they meet and interact with now because they are constantly trying to observe and pay attention to if they have any telling tattoos. Similarly, the Dragonborns in my world literally were just wiped out by this insane tsunami. And the paladin in the group, who I mentioned before, is a Dragonborn. And as far as anyone knows, she could be the very last Dragonborn on the material plane. So, should they encounter another Dragonborn, which they haven't yet, but should they encounter another Dragonborn, that's gonna grab their attention. It's gonna be pretty interesting. They're gonna be looking at that person like, holy shit, she's not the last one. So there's a lot of things you can do to evoke interest and attention, and it's important to just cover all the aspects and understand that it doesn't have to apply to just one NPC. You can apply it to, entire races like I've done with the Drow and the Dragonborns, or you can create NPCs that aren't even central to the plot that you just think are interesting and cool and that just give the players some fun downtime, learning activities, trying to figure out this person's story and why they're here and what they're doing. For the final part of making a compelling NPC, it says that you need to evoke admiration in a powerfully irresistible way. Admiration is hard. I've seen a lot of D&D groups where players don't really have any respect for NPCs. And that's sad because it's almost disrespectful and disingenuous to the other players and to the DM. Because you're just pissing off non-player characters for no reason. Sometimes there is a reason behind it. And if that's justified and the DM's okay with it, and you guys figure out a way for your character to not be an asshole and do that, then it's fine. But in all the situations I've seen, it's never fine. And generally, when that happens, the DM will get angry and their emotions will come out through the NPCs. And you never want to do that. As a DM, you never want your own emotions influencing what the NPCs are doing. You literally need to separate yourself from them. The NPCs are not you. They are a different person in this fantasy world, and you have to evoke that. And you can make them interesting, and you can grab your players' attention, but admiration out of everything is the hardest thing to accomplish. To have your players and their characters admire something you created, really hard. I watch Critical Role, and I love the show to death. They're all really amazing people, and I just enjoy watching it so much. And I actually build my campaign and like prep for my sessions while I'm listening to them talk. But not every NPC Matt builds is admirable to me. Not something I would go like, oh wow, that's such an amazing person, that's so cool, I totally understand them, and like, that's amazing. Not every NPC is like that, and they don't have to be. Believe me, they don't have to be. But the ones you want to be central to your plot, the ones that really matter, you need to give them traits that people can grab onto and relate. I've only done this with a few NPCs that my players have told me. This has only happened a few times. But one of those NPCs, his name is Captain Rumaheim. Captain Rumaheim I actually based off of my idea of what a grandfather should be, or of what a dad should be. This is gonna be a little bit personal, but you know, I'm that girl who like had daddy issues growing up, like absent father, manipulative, whatever you want to call it, right? And unfortunately, that's what it's like for a lot of kids in America, at least, growing up without a father or without some kind of present parent, like missing that other half or feeling like you're missing something. We'll stop there because that can be an entire video in itself. But basically, I drew from those emotions and what I believed someone should be like in that role. And I created Captain Rumaheim. He is a retired naval officer, and he is a dwarf. But more than that, he is a father, and he has one daughter. His wife died years ago, of like sickness. His daughter is like in her 20s, and he's like in his like 60s or so. So dwarves in my world don't live that much longer than humans. So he's, not gonna live much longer. He's got a few injuries, and he has cataracts in his eyes, so he's losing his vision. But the thing that the players took from him is how removed he was from the politics of it all. Captain Rumaheim, despite his position in society and his leadership role, didn't care about politics. There was a general that came into town to take over, and Rumaheim basically just told him, you're a boy and you're captain, you're general, so do with the army what you will. But I think it was the way I played him mostly. I just acted like I thought I would act like if I was a grandfather, in the way I talked to the players, in the way I explained things to them. He wasn't demeaning, and he was respectful of all their power individually, but he also didn't take shit from anyone. Like, if anyone tried to flex on him, like, oh well, I've done this and blah blah blah, he's just like, cool, get in line. We've all done cool stuff. Like, we're all in player context, we're all high level. But of course he said that in game in so many words. And it really garnered a respect from them because he wasn't demeaning, he wasn't disrespectful to them, but he also didn't take any shit from anyone. And not just them, but other NPCs who I set up to be directly antagonistic to him. And I think it just inspired admiration from them because they really latched onto him, they really liked him. Another character I created that was like this was Tethysicisis. Tethysicisis, which I have to apologize, I got that name from a stream I was watching of Divinity, and I don't remember the guy's name or the channel of the stream, but the name is not something I created, it's something someone else created, or they took it from somewhere else and they used it for a character. Either way, it inspired this one. Tethysicisis is a lizard person, and he comes from the swamp. He is very kind of tricksy, he goes invisible a lot, but he never tricks the party. He never is mean to them. And he talks like this, and he is just very silly and positive, and he compliments the players a lot. He compliments there's one person in the group played by one of our players named Rachel Arbor. and she is a halfling, and he had never seen a halfling before. So when he first met her, he was really intrigued, like talking to her all the time, and they got to see a really integral part of this NPC's story, because it was also an integral part of their story when a Death Knight basically invaded his homeland where they were staying and kidnapped one of the player characters and took them to one of the hells. And Tethys saw it all happen. But in the midst of all that, the leader of his family, essentially, died. She got killed. And so while he wanted to help them, he stayed behind to protect his people in case the Death Knight came back. And he told them, basically, get revenge for me, which they never ended up killing the Death Knight. But from there was like a shift in the NPC. And he by far is one of the most emotional NPCs I've had to play, because he went from this young lizard person who's, pretty high ranking in terms of like his status in the group, to suddenly having to be a leader for his people and someone to speak for his people, because none of them knew the languages the players were speaking except for him. And so he suddenly became this key factor in communication and strategy. What do we do now? Our home has been invaded. Where do we go? And he really took the reins. And I think it's one of those things where it's like the players have never tried to mess with him. They have great respect for this NPC, and they always treat him as he treats them. So yeah, I guess evoking admiration in an NPC is best done when you take traits from things that you know yourself admire, and not just I'm a big strong hero type person, but like really get down to their psyche and determine, like, in certain situations, how would this person react? Because Tethys would not react the same way Captain Rumaheim would. They're completely different people, completely different alignments, and yet the party loves them both equally and would protect both of them with everything they had. Those are just my thoughts on how to create a compelling NPC. I know it's not a particularly new video idea. I know there are DMs who have done this in the past, but I wanted to tell you guys how I personally do it my own way, and how I like to think about my NPCs in the world, and even when I'm building them on the spot, because a lot of my NPCs get built on the spot. Tethys was one of those people. And Captain Rumaheim, not someone I technically built on the spot, but I did build him quickly. Lady Onyx, I've had her built for a while, so I really knew her. But Tethys and Rumaheim, surprisingly, the ones I spent the least amount of time preparing, I just had a thought in my mind of what I wanted them to be, and I portrayed that. And it sounds easier than it actually is, and I understand that. But the more you practice, the better you'll get. Because it's taken me 3 years to get to this point, and I'm not perfect. I still mess up. I still, drop accents, and I'm not fully in character all the time. Or sometimes I do things, and then later I think, but would that NPC really have said that? Or would they really have done that? Like, is that really who they are as a person? And, it's okay. You live and you learn and you go on, and you just use it as experience to create something better for the next time.